Hi, I am Soumya. Welcome to Jack of Everything. Throughout the course of history, disease outbreaks have ravaged humanity, sometimes even changing the course of history. Here are some of grievous pandemics dating from ancient to modern times. Our ancestor lives in a small isolated tribe that had a very little chance to spread the germs beyond their community. But after the advent of agriculture, tribes abandoned their nomadic lifestyle and are organized into a stationary civilization. Since the dawn of civilization, mankind has dealt with pandemic. When an epidemic spreads beyond a country's border, that's when the disease officially becomes a pandemic. Globalization makes a pandemic even scarier. Let's start with the oldest pandemic that mentioned in the chronicles. The earliest recorded pandemic happened during the Peloponnesian War. The disease was typhoid fever. Yes, you heard it right. Talking about the war, the two most powerful cities of ancient Greece, Athens and Sparta, went to war with each other in 431 BC. The war, along with pandemic, favored Sparta and weakened the dominance of Athens. After the disease passed through the northern Africa and Horn of African states like Libya, Ethiopia, Egypt, it is crossed the Athenian wall as Sparta led siege. The typhoid fever pandemic outbroke in 430 BC, mostly in northern Africa and Greece. The symptoms of the disease included fever, thirsty, blood throat, and tongue, the red skin, and lesions. The sheer virulence of disease prevented its widespread, but still it killed a quarter of Athenian troops and two-thirds of the population. Can you imagine the easily curable disease of present era with the antibiotic that caused by the salmonella typhi? Once upon a time, it was a pandemic. Do you know? Greeks never called themselves Greeks. This name actually came from Romans. They called themselves Hellenes. This is because the country of Greece is called Hellas. Another major pandemic occurred in 165 AD. The Antonine Plague of 165 AD is also known as the Plague of Galen, after the name of the doctor who described it. The scholars have suspected it to have been either smallpox or measles. The plague have claimed the life of Roman Emperor Lucius Verus, who died in 169. As he belongs to the Antonine dynasty, so the pandemic is called Antonine Plague. So bad. The rampant spread of the disease was started from the Huns. The Huns then infected Germans, who passed it to the Roman troops who were returning from the campaigns in the Near East. Then from the soldiers to the common man. The widespread of the plague is continued until 180 AD. Do you know the sample of smallpox causing varroa virus is found within the DNA of a child mummy in the crypt beneath Lithuanian church? Come to next pandemic that's occurred in 250 AD, the plague of Cyprian. This pandemic afflicted the Roman Emperor about 249 to 262. The pandemic thought to have caused the widespread manpower shortage for food production and the Roman army and severely weakening the emperor during the crisis of 3rd century. The Cyprian plague entailed diarrhea, vomiting, throat ulcer, fever. One of the most dangerous thing happens during this pandemic is that the so-called smart peoples are taking the infection from one place to the other. They are fled from country to escape the infection, but unknowingly they help in spreading the disease. Possibly starting in Ethiopia, it passed to the northern Africa, then into the Rome and Egypt, and then northward. There are recurring outbreaks over the next 3 centuries. In 444 AD, it hit Britain and obstructed the defense efforts against the Picts and the Scots, causing the British to seek help from the Saxons, who would soon control the island. Probably the Britishers learned the law of betrayal from them. Do you know the Cyprian plague is named after the first known victim, Saint Cyprian? So before we move forward, you need to know about the plague so that you can understand why it is a fatal disease and realize the disastrous effect of it in human body. The plague is caused by Yersinia pestis, a zoonotic gram-negative species bacteria, which usually found in mammal and their fleas. Zoonotic means which can easily spread between the animal and the people. The peoples affected through the bite of infected vector fleas, which are commonly found in rat, or inhalation of respiratory droplets or small particle from the patient with the pneumonic plague. There are majorly three kinds of plague. One is bubonic, pneumonic, septicemic plague. The bubonic is the most common and most oftenly happening plague. All these plagues are caused by Yersinia pestis. The bubonic plague get its name from what it does in the body. Like when the Yersinia pestis enter into the human body, then to the lymphatic system where it replicates itself, the lymph node inflamed, then tensed and became painful. At that time it is called a vivo. So from that this plague gets its name bubonic plague. At the advanced stage of the infection, the inflamed lymph node turned into open sores filled with the pus. But the one relief thing is that human to human transmission of the bubonic plague is very rare. Pneumonic plague, it transmits its plague causing bacteria through the air, through the droplets of affected human. It's the longest plague and is most virulent form of the plague. Then coming to the next, septicemic plague is one of the three main forms of the plague. Is a life-threatening infection of the blood, most commonly spread by bites of infected bees. Then coming to the first bubonic plague pandemic, which caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. That is the plague of Justinian. Plague is named after the Byzantine Emperor in Constantinople, Justinian I, who ruled over the Byzantine Empire from 527 to 565. This plague recurrence over the next 2 centuries and eventually killed 50 million people. Again I repeat, 50 million people. It's 26% of world population. Can you believe it? As per the record, it first appearing in the Egypt, but even though its root of the bacterium causing it was found at Qinghai in China. Then the Justinian plague spread through the Palestine and Byzantine Empire, then through the Mediterranean via trade routes. The plague changed the course of the empire, squelching Emperor Justinian's plan to bring the Roman Empire back together and causing the massive economic struggle. You can see the map of the Byzantine Empire with the Justinian conquest shown in the green. Justinian wants to gather all the Romanian Empire together, which he could not do because of this pandemic. At that time, the people thought that it was a disaster act of God. So overall, it is credited with the creating a apocalyptic atmosphere that supported the rapid spread of Christianity. Do you know, Byzantine politicians often avoided killing their rivals in the favor of carrying out ghastly act of a physical mutilation. Yes, they mutilate their rivals. Then coming to the next, it had been around for the ages, but it believed to be started in the 11th century. The leprosy grew into a pandemic in the Europe in the Middle Ages, resulting it in the building a numerous leprosy-focused hospital to accommodate the vast number of victims. The leprosy was believed to be a punishment from the god that ran in the family. A slow developing bacterial disease that caused by the microbacterium leprae, which develops sores and deformities in a body. It is also known as Hansen's disease. It still afflicts tens of thousands of people in a year if not treated with antibiotics such as WHO recommended MDT multi-drug therapy. It can be fatal. In 2005, the World Health Organization declared leprosy has been eradicated worldwide. Do you know? There is still a leprosy colony in US, but the peoples are no longer forced to live there. Once upon a time, it was an island full of leprosy patients. Coming to the next, probably you heard it, the Black Death. Again, another bubonic plague pandemic occurred in Afro-Eurasia from 1346 to 1353. This disease uses plague commonly found in the rat as a vector to jump from animals to the human. The mortality rate hits its peak during the hot and humid month of June, July and August, and it most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, causing the death of 75 to 200 million people, which almost 1/3 of world population. In Eurasia and North Africa, peaking in the Europe from 437, started in Asia and moved west in caravans, entering through Sicily in 1347 AD. When the plague suffers arrived in the port of Messina, it spreads through the Europe rapidly. The dead bodies became so prevalent that many remained rotting on ground and created a constant stretch in cities. England and France are so incapacitated by the plague that the country is called a truce to their war. The British feudal system collapsed when the plague changed the economic circumstances and demographics, ravaging population in Greenland. Vikings lost the strength to wage the battle against native population, and their exploration of North America halted. In 1346, during the siege of Kaffa, now Feodosia in Crimea, do you know Genghis Khan and his forces used bubonic plague infected people as a bioweapon to conquer European countries? Yes, you heard it right. The Mongols uses the dead bodies or the people who are suffered with this plague and through the cannon to their enemy territory, so that these enemy peoples are suffered with this plague and they easily conquered the land. Then come next, it's not pandemic, it's an epidemic. Because of scientific, it's a milestone in epidemiology. The Broad Street cholera outbreak or the Golden Square outbreak was a severe outbreak of cholera that occurred in 1854 near the Broad Street in London, England, and occurred during 446 to 460 cholera pandemic happening worldwide. This outbreak, which killed 616 people, but it is best known for the physician John Snow's study of its cause and his hypothesis that germ contaminated water was the source of cholera rather than the particles in the air, which referred as the miasma. Before this epidemic, everyone believes that the cholera was caused by the particles in the air or miasmata, which arose from the decomposing matter or the dirty organic sources. The miasma particles are thought to travel through the air and infect individuals, thus cause cholera. But after a rigorous research, Dr. Snow proposed the germ theory. According to this principle, cause of cholera was a germ cell which had not yet been identified. Dr. Snow worked around the clock, tracked the information from the hospital and public records on when the outbreak began, and found that the hand pump near the Broad Street was the source of epidemic. On 7 September 1854, the Snow took his research to the town official and convinced them to take the handle off the pump and making it impossible to draw the water. The officials are reluctant to believe him but took the handle off as a trial only, but finds outbreak of cholera almost immediately trickle to a stop. You can see the replica of the pump which handle is taken up by the Snow picture. You know, when Snow did this, he was an apprentice, not a regular medicine practitioner. This map was prepared by the John Snow, showing the cluster of cholera near the contaminated pump which is located at the Broad Street. That's why he's not the father of epidemiology for systematic study of an epidemic. Do you know Dr. Snow as a leader in development of anesthesia? So he personally admitted chloroform to Queen Victoria when she gave birth to the last two of her children. Then coming to the next, the avian-borne flu that resulted 50 million deaths worldwide. 1918 flu or the Spanish flu, first observed in Fort Raleigh, United States and Kansas, then spread through the Europe and other parts of Asia, then around the world. At that time, there were no effective drugs or vaccine to treat this killer flu strain. You can see the photo of the soldiers from the Fort Raleigh, Kansas, ill with the Spanish flu at a hospital. By the October, hundreds of thousands of Americans died and the body storage scarcity hit crisis level. Studies have shown that the immune system of the Spanish flu victims were weakened by the adverse climate condition, which were particularly unseasonably cold and wet for the extended period of time during pandemic. But the flu threat disappeared in the summer of 1919 when the most of the infected had either developed immunities or died. Do you know, due to the ongoing war of World War I, many governments have control over the media to maintain the more moral or censorship, minimized early reports of disease. As the Spain is a neutral country, not participated in the war, the newspapers are free to report the epidemic's effect in Spain. So, such as the grave of illness King Alfonso XIII, and this story created a false impression of Spain as especially hard hit. This gave rise to the name Spanish flu. You know, the Spanish flu killed a number of famous people, including sociologist Max Weber, Frederick Trump, the grandfather of former US President Donald Trump. Even as per some newspaper article, 1918 Spanish flu pandemic killed more US soldiers than did any Great War battle. Coming to the next, the first identified in 1981. AIDS destroys a person's immune system, resulting in eventual death by disease that the body could usually fight. When the symptoms subside, the carrier from the highly infected through the blood and genital fluid The disease destroyed the CD4 cell or the T cells. The HIV/AIDS has had a large impact on society, both as illness or as a source of discrimination. Those infected by HIV virus encounter fever, headache, and enlarged lymph nodes as the initial symptom, which may occur within the 2 to 4 weeks after the exposure. Acquired immunodeficiency syndrome (AIDS) is defined as an HIV infection which had either a CD4 or T cell count below the 200 cells per microliter, or the occurrence of specific disease associated with the HIV infection. In the absence of specific treatment, around the half of the people infected in HIV develop the AIDS within the 10 years, and the most common initial condition that alert to the presence of AIDS are the pneumocystis, pneumonia, or cachexia. AIDS was first observed in the American Gai community, but is believed to have developed from a symphysis virus from the West Africa in 1920s. This disease, which spreads through the sweat and body fluid, moved to Haiti in 1960, then New York and San Francisco in 1970. The antiretroviral therapy have been developed to slow progress of the disease, but 35 million people worldwide have died HIV/AIDS since its discovery, and a cure is yet to be found. Do you know? The inspired from the yellow ribbons honoring the American soldiers serving in the Gulf Wars, the artists choose to create red ribbon to symbolize and support of solidarity for the peoples living with the HIV and to remember those who have died from the AIDS-related illness. Coming to the next, you probably heard it, the first identified in 2003. After the several months of the cases, the severe acute respiratory syndrome is believed to have possibly started with the bats, spread to cat, then to humans in Guangdong province of China in November 2002. Then followed by 26 other countries infecting 8,096 people and 774 deaths. SARS is characterized by the respiratory problems like dry cough, fever, head and body ache, and is spread through the respiratory droplets from the cough, sneeze. Quarantine efforts are proved effective, and by July the virus was contained and had not reappeared again since. China was criticized for trying to suppress the information about the virus at the beginning of the outbreak. The SARS was seen by the global health professional as a wake-up call to improve the outbreak responses, and the lessons from the pandemic were used to keep the disease like H1N1, Ebola and Zika under control. Then coming to the present, not required any formal introduction. All of us are about what's ongoing pandemic. Now, let's come to present. Not required any formal introduction. All of us are about the ongoing pandemic, more or less. Let me give you a glimpse of coronavirus. Coronavirus is a group of related RNA virus that causes the disease in mammals and birds. An RNA virus is a virus which has ribonucleic acid as its genetic material, like we have DNA, which carries genetic code. RNA plays the same role in that virus. In humans and birds, they causes respiratory tract infection that can range from mild to lethal. In human, they causes the respiratory tract infection that can range from mild to lethal. The mild illness in the human included some cases of common cold, which is also caused by other viruses, predominantly rhinovirus, while more lethal varieties can cause SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, MERS, Middle East respiratory syndrome, and COVID-19. In cow and pig, they cause diarrhea, while in mice they can cause hepatitis. That is all about coronavirus. Talking about ongoing pandemic, listen carefully. On March 11, 2020, World Health Organization announced that COVID-19 virus was officially a pandemic after barreling through 114 countries in 3 months and infecting over 118,000 people, and spread was not anywhere near finished. COVID-19 is caused by novel coronavirus, a new coronavirus strain that has not been previously found in people. The first reported case in China appearing in November 17, 2019 in Hubei province in the city of Wuhan, but went unrecognized. 8 more cases appeared in December, with researchers pointing to the unknown viruses. Allow me to briefly tell you about this historic city of Wuhan. Wuhan briefly serving as a capital city of China in 1927 to 1937. Do you know in July 16, 1966, the most powerful political publicity stunt in Chinese history was done by 73-year-old China man Mao Zedong. He plunged into Yangtze River near Wuhan and made a world record-breaking swim in Yangtze River. whose ripple effect lasts long in Chinese politics. Let's come back to our topic. Symptoms included respiratory problem, fever, cough, and can lead to pneumonia and death. Like SARS, it spread through the droplets from the mouth and nose. Many learned about COVID-19 when ophthalmologist Dr. Li Wenliang defined government order and released safety information to other doctors. The following day, China informed WHO and charged Li with crime, but latterly tried with COVID-19 just after a month. As prevention better than cure, so maintain social distance, wear masks, use sanitizer when you touch any public use things, and get vaccinated as soon as possible. Talking about number, you can read on the screen. Another thing, do you know about China? If you have ever celebrated or ever seen the Chinese New Year celebration, you may have noticed the color red can be found everywhere during this time. This is because the red traditionally symbolizes the happiness and good fortune of joy. So that's why also red is banned in China's funerals. Do you know, in ancient China, the soldiers sometimes wear the armor made from paper. Apart from previously mentioned pandemics, still there are more than half a dozen pandemics are inscripted in the dark side of the history. So let's go through them very quickly. In 1492, the Columbian Exchange, which killed as many as 90% of indigenous peoples of Caribbean. Then in 1665, Great Plague of London. 1817, first cholera pandemic. 1855, third plague pandemic. 1875, Fiji measles pandemic. 1889, Russian flu. 1957, Asian flu. Do you know the first ever lockdown was imposed by the government of Italy in order to curb Black Death cases? The word quarantine is directly inspired from Italian word quarantino, which means 40 days period. Thank you. If you like, please subscribe for more such video.